Thank you very much for this opportunity to share with you what we've been finding out about a ketogenic way of eating and how it may benefit women with lipedema, people with lymphatic disorders, and other fat disorders. So really excited to be here to share this with you. I have no disclosures. So I just want to start off with a couple of before-after pictures of some women that have used this way of eating. So this is a woman who reports that she feels better at 40 than she ever has in her life. She has more energy, no aches and pains, and doing it for about a year using a ketogenic way of eating, and she's lost about 74 pounds. I do give you Katrina's name and email address because she has been so successful with a ketogenic way of eating that she is now coaching people to help them do this way of eating. She had stage 3 lipedema, and in 2014, September, she was 400 pounds. 2 years of using a ketogenic way of eating, and she was down almost 200 pounds. And this was without exercise. She didn't add exercise until about a year into her process. Here is another woman, very obvious lipedema body shape, and she used 13 months of a ketogenic way of eating, and she's down 127 pounds. This is a very recent photo because we started a Facebook group for women with lipedema and that wanted to use a ketogenic way of eating. And so here she is. You can see the ankle cuffs, and there's some abdominal obesity as well. And here she is after 5 months, 50 pounds down. But even more important with this way of eating is what we're finding out of the non-scale victories. The things that happen with this way of eating that have nothing to do with weight loss or how much you lose. So here is a woman, she talked about how for the first time she's able to easily sit in the economy section of an airplane. She fits in some jeans that she bought years ago but could never wear. And this was only with 8.5 weeks of using a ketogenic way of eating, and she's down 21 pounds, which is not a huge amount, but she's already seeing a difference. Another person looking at her swelling. So, and you can also see in that photo the inflammatory effect. So she is quite red in the first one, so a decreased swelling. Another person, she talked about she's down 20 pounds, but more importantly, she's no longer using her painkillers. So no more of those random aches and pains, migraines, no brain fog. So she's very happy with using this way of eating. And that's only with a month of using this way of eating. Another person, she talks about how she was just about into a wheelchair. She felt like she was going to end up there. But after using this way of eating for a few months, she talks about, here's our typical day. She went for a swim for an hour, then she went to Home Depot for a couple hours, spent the rest of the day painting. So she feels fantastic, just again, with a very short time of using this way of eating. So it all started when I had the opportunity to go to the NIH symposium in September of 2015. This was the first ever symposium on lymphatic disorders. And I was presenting my poster of a study that I had done with a ketogenic way of eating and lymphedema. So I had a group of past patients that all had a BMI of over 30, and they all had lymphedema. And we put them into a lifestyle group and encouraged the transition to a ketogenic way of eating. Very good results, and so I was presenting that. Because we know lipedema affects mostly women. We have that disproportionate distribution of fat. A lot of women have that hypersensitivity and pain associated with it, easy bruising, but most importantly, it seems that lipedema is widely believed to be resistant to diet and exercise. So would it be resistant to a ketogenic way of eating? So to discuss that, I want to talk about the two different theories of weight management and how we deal with fat deposition. So we got the calories in, calories out theory. So that's a balance between how many calories you're taking in and how many you're expending, versus the metabolic theory of fat deposition. So this has to do with hormones. and what is the insulin response to the various foods that we're eating. So we'll look at both of those theories. So calories in, calories out in lipedema. We have that balance. We're eating a certain number of calories in food, and now we need a certain amount of calories to power our bodily functions, but then also whatever activities we're doing. So how does this type of way of eating bear out? So what you're going to do if you're using this type of method for weight management, you're going to restrict your calories. It's going to be mostly a plant-based diet. It's usually going to be low fat. It may be a liquid diet. So this is a temporary way to reduce your weight, and you may be getting pre-prepared packaged foods, liquid diet, and then they're going to couple that with a lot of exercise. So we're going to try to change that scale so that we have more calories going out than coming in. How does it affect lipedema? Well, in this way of eating, you feel very deprived. You usually have constant hunger. You can be fatigued, irritable, lethargic. Unfortunately, with lipedema, you're going to lose weight just on the upper part of your body. It's not going to have any effect on the lower half. And you may even experience increased pain. Unfortunately, with this way of eating, this way of dieting, you're going to be caught into this carbohydrate cycle. So in this plant-based, low-fat way of eating, you're eating a lot of carbohydrates. Carbohydrates cause your blood sugar to rise. Insulin is going to be released in response to that to get the sugar out of the blood. You have excess carbohydrates that you're ingesting, so if they're not being used for energy, they're going to be just shunt into adipose tissue to be stored for energy for later. So with the insulin running around, we're going to have increased fat storage. Well, now our blood sugar has dropped, so we're hungry again. So we're going to eat more carbs. And so you're trapped in this cycle where you're constantly eating carbs, and now you're gaining more weight, getting more fat tissue. So looking at the metabolic theory of weight management and lipedema. So now we're looking at what is the insulin response to the various foods we eat. And so when you eat a carbohydrate, the insulin response is very high. It has to get the sugar out of the blood. We can only maintain a very narrow amount of sugar in the blood at any given time. So we have to have insulin get the excess out. When we eat protein, we're going to still have a moderate response of insulin. When we eat fat, pretty much no response. So what kind of way of eating will we use if we're using the metabolic theory? And this is going to focus on now carbohydrate restriction because we don't want to have insulin running around. We're going to emphasize eating healthy fats. And then we're looking at eating real foods, not packaged or processed foods. So this way of eating is going to result in a very stable blood sugar. We're not going to have those wild swings. We're going to feel satiated because fat is very satiating. Our mood is going to stabilize. Typically with a blood sugar swing, that's what's causing your mood to change. You're going to have increased energy and vitality because you have lots of power from the fat. You'll have an increased desire to be active. You'll have clearer thinking, so less brain fog. Decreased pain, because we're thinking the carbohydrates are very inflammatory. So we have carbohydrate restriction and we have the decreased pain. But now what we're seeing is that we're going to lose weight, not just on the upper part of the body, but we're going to lose fat also on the lower body. Basically, this is it. I think Linda Ann gave you a little bit of rundown already of what this way of eating would look like. Here are the delicious foods on this way of eating. It's just whole, real foods. So we have non-starchy vegetables, leafy greens, asparagus, cauliflower, eggplant, broccoli. We have healthy fats, olive oil. We have different meats, fatty meats, salmon, fatty fishes, cheese, eggs, butter. The tiny bit of fruit that you could have is going to be limited to berries, some nuts. I wanted to show you some photos of what a meal could look like if you're eating this way. It doesn't look that different than what you would be eating. If you were to sit down with your family or eat in a restaurant, you wouldn't look like you're on some bizarre diet plan, okay? This looks pretty normal. Now, if you are a vegetarian, but you will eat dairy and eggs, you could have this mushroom cheese omelet. You don't have to have red meat in order to do a ketogenic way of eating. It does make it easier, but you don't have to. If you eat fish, you could have that nice salmon skewer. And you can also have that, looks like a really nice pork chops with a sauce over some asparagus. So pretty normal looking, delicious meals. I'd like to answer a couple common questions that we get when we're talking about this way of eating, because it is so different from what we're used to. The first is about ketoacidosis, because quite often ketosis, which is a normal function, it just means fat burning, that's confused with ketoacidosis, which is a dangerous condition. So looking at what our blood ketone levels are in just a typical fed state, eating a typical standard American diet, 0.1 millimoles per liter in our blood at that time. If we did not eat overnight, the next morning it's going to be 0.3. If we're eating a ketogenic diet, it's 1 to 3 millimolars. If I'm not going to eat for 20 days, it still only goes up to 10 millimolars. So diabetic ketoacidosis does not start until 25. Basically, as long as you can produce insulin, you cannot get diabetic ketoacidosis. So this is only a dangerous condition for someone who cannot produce insulin, such as type 1 diabetes. What about cholesterol? I'm eating all this fat. Isn't it going to increase my cholesterol and give me heart disease? So let's look at that. It turns out that in just about every, well, I would say every randomized controlled trial with human subjects looking at various ways of eating, every single one, the group who used this way of eating had lower triglycerides, higher HDL, the so-called good cholesterol, lower LDL, the so-called bad cholesterol. They also had excellent other blood markers, including decreased C-reactive protein, which we know is an indicator of risk, and decreased A1C. So this is the way of eating to reverse type 2 diabetes. And Linda Ann already talked a little bit about what are healthy fats and what are unhealthy fats. So if I'm going to eat a high-fat diet, I want to make sure I'm eating the healthy fats. So number one, saturated fat actually is a very healthy fat. There's a lot of research out right now, and I'd be happy to send you references to articles right now looking at the whole diet heart. The fat heart hypothesis has been proven wrong. There is no problem with saturated fat. There is no correlation between saturated fat and cardiovascular disease. And so in this way of eating, you can eat a lot of saturated fat from animal sources, very available there. But if you don't want to eat those types of food, you can get your saturated fat from coconut, some nuts that are high in saturated fat, such as macadamia. Monounsaturated fat, also a healthy fat, olive oil, dairy products, eggs. And polyunsaturated omega-3 fat, again, most readily available from marine animals. But unhealthy fats, those trans fats, the partially hydrogenated oils, Crisco, margarine, I think we all know about that. And then I would also say that polyunsaturated fats from vegetable oils, highly processed, the way to get oil out of a vegetable or a seed is a chemical and heating process that damages it, so it's highly inflammatory. So on this way of eating, we do avoid vegetable oils. But aren't carbohydrates essential? We know we have essential amino acids, protein. We have essential fatty acids, fat. Aren't carbohydrates also essential? Essential means that we can't produce it ourselves and we need it for life. Well, it turns out in the dietary reference intakes from the Institute of Medicine, this is in 2008, they also said the same thing in 2012. The lower limit of dietary carbohydrate compatible with life apparently is 0, as long as you eat enough protein and fat. So there are no essential carbohydrates. And on this way of eating, I'm not saying to have no carbohydrates. I'm just saying to really restrict them, have a very low carbohydrate diet. We do, because we tend to only eat the muscle meat of animals, we do miss out on a lot of micronutrients. And so on this way of eating, it is suggested that you do have non-starchy vegetables, leafy greens, stuff like that, in order to get those micronutrients. But if you would like to eat the whole animal, I personally love organ meat. So if you're gonna eat the whole animal, you're gonna get those micronutrients. I put this in because it's something that just happened a week ago. This is Professor Tim Noakes from South Africa. He's a researcher and a physician in South Africa. And a couple of years ago, he made the recommendation that mothers can wean their children onto low-carb, high-fat, ketogenic way of eating. And a dietitian took issue with that and sent in a claim to their local medical board. And so he was brought up on charges that he was giving unconventional nutritional advice. And so we just spent the last couple of years fighting that. And so we just got the decision was last Friday that he was exonerated of that. But it did give him an excellent opportunity to get the word out about low-carb, high-fat, ketogenic way of eating. And he gave over 40 hours of deposition talking about the science and benefits of this way of eating that you can watch on YouTube. If you just search for Tim Noakes, you can see him. And so he also was able to give all this evidence, over 47 randomized controlled trials, lots of research articles, meta-analysis, stuff like that. The opposing side only had one article that they used, and it was actually an article that was published after the claim was filed against him. So some resources for you. The first one is we do have a Facebook group for women with lipedema, and the ketogenic way of eating gives you lots of support. I do have also, too, we just recently completed a worldwide online summit where we interviewed over 40 experts in the ketogenic way of eating, including Tim Noakes, and as well as women with lipedema who are using this way of eating. But check out that Facebook group to get information about how this way of eating and to get support. And just some resources for you. I think the best way to get started is try dietdoctor.com. Andreas Einfeld from Sweden. He gives you the basics on how to get started in this way of eating, and some more technical stuff from some of the other websites, some excellent books. Wheat Belly by Dr. Davis. And if you want to get a good history on why we're so afraid of dietary fat in this country, you can read The Big Fat Surprise by Nina Teicholz. And thank you very much. I really appreciate it.